Hey everyone, this is Roger. I hope everyone's doing fine during this quarantine, and I hope everybody is in good health watching this video and in general. Today, I kind of want to talk about something that I kind of grew up with. So, if you don't know me too well, and you probably saw signs from behind me, I know you can kind of see a poster back there of UFC. I'm a huge mixed martial arts fan, and I watch more than the UFC, not just that company. I watch a lot of Japan events. I was a huge Pride fan back in the day. But I think what really spawned me into liking MMA was wrestling. I mean, as a kid, I think most of us watched wrestling, and that's all we could get on TV. And that kind of spawned it. And I enjoy wrestling a little bit still today. I'll watch events here and there. Can't watch like I used to. But with this fame, I used to play a lot of wrestling games. And my all-time favorite will be the N64 PS2 era of the WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy, along with the WCW games, and the SmackDown games on the PlayStation. And then maybe I'll cover those. I really enjoyed those games, and I can play them anytime. But before we got these great classics, we had a lot of variants of wrestling games throughout. And what made me think of this for this video was I posted a GIF of Angry Video Game Nerd. I'm a huge fan of that channel. And it reminded me of the 3 wrestling games you see here in the clip. And I wanted to try out all the wrestling games in Nintendo. I played about 8 of these, or 7 of these, out of the 9. And I just was curious of what I remember back in the day, because I had different memories of the games when I played them back now. And just some I never got to play. So I'm going to give you a list in order. And this was just a fun little recap video to see which one, if you want to play an old wrestling game, which one to play. First up, we have Tag Team Wrestling in 1983. And this was like a port to the NES. It was available in arcade and Apple II. And I wasn't a big fan of this one at all. You kind of initiated a grab and could select what you wanted to do. So that's where the computer feel came in. But for Nintendo, this didn't work well at all. The graphics, I mean, it's 83, nothing special there. And it didn't seem like much was happening. The only claim I could find of this game was you fought the strong bads, and if you're a big Homestar Runner fan, I think this is where the origin came from. That was like the biggest fame I had of this game. Next up, in 85, we had M.U.S.C.L.E, the anime. They had a wrestling game that came out, and you had a few characters to select from. And this game was simple, but it wasn't as bad. I was able to play it. You got these little weird power-ups. I'm not sure what they really did. Your character glowed. And it was kind of simple controls. You just hit each other. But overall, this one wasn't that bad. I probably wouldn't recommend playing this one. But in general, this was like a good move start up. But then we had like a 4-year gap before we got any game. And then WWF WrestleMania came out. This game was weird. I remember playing this one a decent amount. This is probably the first wrestling game I kind of played. And it showed its age bad. The characters looked okay. You kind of just had to group your opponent in a corner and just keep punching them. That's basically the strategy. The best part of this game was the music background. It would play like the wrestler's music while you fought, and like the Hulk Hogan theme song sounded like the Hulk Hogan theme song. That was the only memory I had of this game. And it took a while to win a match, but I was not overly impressed by this. My favorite actually wrestling Nintendo game came out next, which is Fire Pro Wrestling. I think it was Superstar Pro Wrestling in Japan, but this came out like 8 months later. And this one didn't have any licensed fighters or anything, but this was fun. There's a lot of spinning kick to the face that you could do. If you ever played this game, I forgot this guy did this weird hand move that reminded me of like the Mandible Claw from Mankind. But this was probably my favorite one out of the Nintendo era. You had the guy with the star for the mask, and this was overall fun. If you want to play an old Nintendo game, this is the one I would say you should play. The next year in 1990, we got WCW Wrestling, and this game was different. I actually liked the changes here. So when you picked a character, you were able to select moves you could do. So you got wider variety of moves here. The earlier games we were talking about, you didn't really get too much variety. And this one, you were starting to get more of that wrestling core to come in, like pressing up B, down B to do different moves. And that's what we've seen transition after a while. But this game was very, very hard. I couldn't get nothing going, and the only way I won my second match was he kept trying to pin me near the rope, and I kept getting rope break enough to lower his health and get the victory. So this one had a high difficulty curve, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. I didn't like how the characters kind of looked. Like, Fire Pro just looked better to me. But I did like that they were starting the movesets here. Next up, we had Techno World Wrestling. This became more of an actual game than wrestling, because like you had this pre-match thing, you could do squats, and that's what I ended up doing. But after that, there's like a variety of moves you can do, but they were hard to trigger. I couldn't figure them out. I didn't really look up directions either, but I was able to do like these 3 moves constantly while my opponent kept doing all these other moves. They added an announcer at the bottom, which I thought was cool, but just stuff happened so fast, like you couldn't really read it, and it got repetitive fast. So it kind of just was real estate taking up. They did do the techno bowl, like the techno football thing when a power move happened. You got that animation, and you got that in this wrestling game as well. And that was cool too, but overall, I just didn't enjoy this one much. Next up, we got WWF Wrestling Challenge. That also came out in 1990. 1990 was a big year. We had WCW, WWF, and Techno came out with a wrestling game. This one is my favorite WWF game. This is where we got the weird 3D like ring was shaped like a diamond on your screen, but the characters looked more like the characters, and the game just was more fun. In general, like I was able to do more moves and enjoy the game a lot more. It was more brighter and just in general fun. I don't have much to say. I just remember picking the Big Boss Man when I played as it a lot and winning, and here's me playing and winning again. So I thought the difficulty was okay, but this was probably the WWF game you want to try out. 2 years later in 92, we got the Steel Cage Challenge. This was like the first wrestling game to leave like all the other ones you could do single matches or tag teams. This one you had the cage, and this was a big deal back in time. It was like, we can finally fight in the cage, and it's not that exciting. This game added a lot more like button mashing moves. WrestleMania Challenge didn't have that much, but this one, like everything required button moves. So when you grappled, you had to push buttons real fast to win the grapple and then do your move. You have to press real fast to get up. Just a lot of speed pressing and directions here, which doesn't translate well today. And the steel cage was just, I don't know, it was lackluster. Like, you could throw them into the cage and like hurt them real bad, and then you climb to the top and win. It just didn't feel fun. Like, it was weird. I was expecting a lot more from this. I kind of remember renting this back in the day. But this was the other game. The other two I'd never played before was that Tag Team Wrestling and M.U.S.C.L.E. The last game for the Nintendo era, which was for the Game Boy, and I got that feel from it, was King of the Ring from WWF. And this came out in 93. So this was very late into the run of Nintendo. And like I said, it got the Game Boy feel, so that's how a lot of the menu looked to me. But in general, this one wasn't bad. It did take the steel cage controls, so you kind of had some of that button mashing back. But the characters looked a lot better, and overall, it wasn't too bad. It just didn't play as well to me as the WrestleMania Challenge did, though, and that came out 3 years earlier. So overall, I kind of enjoyed looking back through all these games, and like I mentioned, there was 3 of them I didn't remember playing. I might have rented one, but all the others I remember playing a lot of, and Fire Pro Wrestling was my favorite. I played a lot of that. I think that was the actual first wrestling game I ever got. The WWF WrestleMania was the first licensed one I ever played, but I remember having Fire Pro Wrestling and playing that just constantly. And it was very repetitive, but I liked it. And then, like I said, the WrestleMania Challenge, if you want a licensed game, the WCW, I didn't care for too much. It was just, it seemed like it was setting up for games later on. So it was kind of cool to look at that aspect. So that's it on a quick recap of the Nintendo games. Maybe next month, if I get time, I'll look into the Super Nintendo games. But I'll probably make something on the SmackDown series. I'm trying to get all of those games. They're just really, really expensive. So I may not get that. So I may just do a couple videos of the ones I have for Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 2 and look into that. But Hope you enjoyed, and go play some wrestling games. And like I said, if you never played any wrestling games, check out the PS2 and 64 era for probably the best retro ones you can play. Thank you for your time. Peace.